Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze. Welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters. Today we're going to have on Tony Hixon of the Hixon Zuercher Capital Management. And he wrote a book, Retirement Stepping Stones, Finding Meaning, Live with Purpose, and Leave a Legacy. He's going to talk about his book as well as retirement and how this can affect your mental health and how you can retire effectively and maintain your walk with God. Hello and welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters. Today we have Tony Hixon on. So two Tonys today. And he has written a book. I'll let him talk about that book in a little bit here as well. He runs a company called Hixon Zuercher. Is that how you pronounce that? Zuercher Capital Management. So you can find him at tonyhixon.com. And why don't you start off by telling us a little about yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, well, first of all, Tony, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Having two Tonys on the podcast will be a little bit odd, but hopefully you can tell our voices apart, I'm sure. So yeah, Tony Hixon, born and raised in Northwest Ohio. My dad was a farmer and factory worker. Mom was a nurse, and attended church all the way from when I was a little kid, and made my faith my own in my college years. College years went into a financial degree with an accounting major, and upon graduation from that, worked at a CPA firm for about 4 years. And it was in those 4 years that I decided that preparing tax returns and sitting behind a desk all day, typing numbers into a calculator just wasn't for me. I couldn't imagine a career of that. What I'd rather do is sit across from the table from a client, helping them navigate these crazy markets and a financial journey. So in 2002, my business partner, Adam Zuercher, and I, we set out to help individuals make wise decisions with their money. We had 0 clients. We had 0 assets to manage. We worked out of a spare bedroom in his house, and we had a desk, a telephone, and a passion in our hearts to help steward our clients' money well. Fast forward 20 years later. Actually, we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary as a business last week. So we've been 20 years in business. We now serve around 300 households in and around Northwest Ohio and throughout the United States. And God has entrusted us to steward over 300 million in assets under management. So it's kind of been my journey and my story up to this point. So thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. And it's really interesting. We're talking about my wife. She's in financial management, as well as my dad's actually an accountant as well. He's a management accountant. So he does management for companies is what he does. So it's kind of cool to get to speak to somebody else who's kind of in that industry.
For sure. Yeah. Maybe the podcast should be with me and Karen instead, right?
That would be interesting, actually. My wife does not like this kind of stuff, so she would not.
Got it. Okay.
So why don't you tell us about your testimony and what God is currently doing in your life?
Yeah. As I stated, I was born and raised in a Christian home, made my faith my own. In college, I would say that God continues to narrow in and focus me on taking action on the things that he's planted in my heart. And as my career unfolded in the financial management industry, started in 2002, and really the way that our industry works is our goal is to really help people retire. And a lot of that, there's some sub goals there to help people save for their kids' college or put a down payment on their home. But the majority of advice that we give is helping those people on the journey toward retirement. And the journey that I was on, I was educated and had good software and credentialing and experience to be able to run all the financial numbers, and got to be really good at it. About halfway through my career, about 10 years into my career, I had a situation occur within my family, and specifically a story that occurred with my mom that really changed the trajectory of my career and the advice I give and the testimony that I share today. So with your permission, Tony, would you be okay if I'd shared a little bit about my mom's story and the background there?
For sure. I'd love to hear it.
My mom, her name is Pam, yeah, Pam Hixon, and she graduated as a registered nurse and went into a local hospital. And a local hospital would do swing shifts, and so you would have these 12-hour shifts from time to time, and it wouldn't be very regular. You might be on a night shift one weekend and day shift the next. And as my mom and dad had my sister and then me, raising a young family with that schedule was not conducive. And so she began to seek other employment, and she found an opportunity at a home health agency, and that was her opportunity to have more regular hours. She could make home visits, care for the patient, and be home for us to cook supper after we got off the bus at school, from school and all that. She was able to be there in the evening. Um, as she really got into the home health industry, one thing that she found a particular passion for, and something that was really starting to be a new and innovative part of healthcare, was the hospice program. And for those of you who may not be aware, hospice is basically end of life care. It's the healthcare system basically says there's not much more we can do for you. We want to send you home so that you can be surrounded by familiar surroundings and by loved ones as you transition from this life to the next. And that career is not for everyone, but my mom thrived in that. And she really enjoyed providing that care for not only for the patient, but for the families. And she would provide that peace and that comfort as best as she could as this person transitioned from this life to the next. And she found herself going to making friends. They would pass away, going to the funeral, and then moving on to the next family. A career of that leads to a certain point of relational and physical burnout. While it was her source of passion, it was also a very hard, very emotionally taxing career as well.
I bet.
I would also add to that around the mid 2000s is when electronic medical records really began to take hold here in the United States. And electronic medical records required the use of a computer. And if you know anything about Pam Hixon, she did not know how to use a computer. She was technologically inferior and really had no desire to sit behind the desk typing in notes into a keyboard. She would rather be bedside taking care of these patients. And unfortunately, she was unable to, and she was unable to spend as much time bedside. She had to spend her time entering these records. And by the time 2000s had kind of elapsed, 2008, 2009, she was suffering from probably the worst career burnout I had ever seen. And we were smart enough to separate business and family. So she had a primary financial advisor. And so she went to her and ran all the numbers, and the primary financial advisor whipped out her software, her credentialing, her experience, and she gave my mom and dad the green light to retire. And she thought, wow, that would be kind of cool if I could just get out of this rat race and just really enjoy a retirement. Well, because she knew what I did for a living, obviously, she desired to allow me to give her a second opinion. So she brought all of her financial documents, and I too whipped out my software, my credentialing, and my experience, and I came up with the same result as the primary financial advisor. And I gave her the green light to retire. And in fall of 2010, she did. She pulled the trigger, told her organization, she had ran a hospice agency at the time, that she would be retiring in about a month or so. And so she transitioned out of hospice, and she knew exactly what she was retiring from. But Tony, I'm here to tell you today that she had no idea what she was retiring to. And winters in Northwest Ohio, perhaps the same as in Canada, are long, cold, and dark. And so she transitioned into this period of time where she felt lonely, hopeless, meaningless, purposeless. She had no idea what she was going to do in this newfound place. And retirement became her biggest regret. And as she paced the floor back and forth for months, trying to figure out what she was going to do, what purpose she could have served, she began to sink into a deep depression, and anxiety overwhelmed her And though she tried counseling from pastors and those around her, none were successful. And on March 22nd, 2011, my mom, Pam Hixon, she chose to take her life. And she left behind her high school sweetheart, my dad, who didn't know how to navigate life without her. She left behind myself and my sister. And at the time, we had two daughters, her grandchildren. My wife, 7 months pregnant with what would have been her first grandson, all left behind with the ripple effects of her decision. And it wasn't right away, but over time, I learned that retirement is not just checking financial boxes. Retirement is a non-financial decision just as much as it is financial. And that it is finding purpose is not just making sure you have enough money to sleep at night, but enough purpose to get up in the morning. And so over time, this last part of my career, I've helped our clients from a non-financial perspective, ensuring that they know exactly what they're retiring to, and they continue a life of meaning beyond retirement.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important message for people to hear, because I do know of a lot of people who, when they retire, they're lost. Many of them, after just a year or so, they get another job because they just can't handle being retired. They need to be doing something. That's why you see a lot of them take up hobbies, and some of them hobby after hobby after hobby, because they just don't know what to do with themselves.
Right. Well, oftentimes in your career, it becomes your identity, right? You build social structures. You have a skill set. You're being paid to do it. You're doing it well. You're climbing the corporate ladder. You're finding purpose and meaning in the work that you do. And yet, there's this American ideal and a Canadian ideal that says at a certain point you should not have to do that anymore. And while that sounds cool on a commercial and they make it look really cool, all the vacations you can take, you can't vacation for 365 days a year. Golfing gets boring after a while. There has to be something that fills that void, that fills that time. And many retirees do find a period of time right after retirement. In fact, my research has shown that 40% of retirees experience depression within the first 6 months after retirement. And it's just because the transition is so difficult. They found so much meaning and purpose in their work, and they were so excited about this event, this thing, this retirement, and it ends up not being what they hoped it would be. And they knew exactly that they had enough money to make it happen, but they failed to check the boxes of understanding what they would do for the 40, 50 hours per week that they now that now is void.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from our focus being in a lot of the wrong places in our life, and God is the one who should be filling that void in our life, and we tend to think of more the material
That's right.
things of life, which is why it's so important what you're doing, not just helping with the finances, but helping with their personal side, because people do need that, and they need to feel the connections with other people,
Right.
and learn that the material things they're not important. They don't matter. Once you're gone, those material possessions are gone.
That's right. Yeah, and oftentimes upon retirement, what we encourage, well, actually pre-retirement, we often encourage our clients to do a values assessment. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. It's what do you value? What do you feel is important? And once the client is able, or once the person is able to identify what it is that brings them joy, that brings them purpose, whether it's serving in their local church, or whether it's volunteering in the library to read to youth, whether it's watching grandkids for a period of time per week, all of those things that, whether you value family or volunteerism, those things are ultimately what will drive what's next. It's not so much what I'm going to buy, it's what am I going to do in retirement.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I know that was behind a lot of what drove you writing your book, you want to tell us the title of your book and what this book's about, what the purpose of it is?
For sure. So the book title is Retirement Stepping Stones, and that title comes from a saying that I once heard: "Turning your stumbling blocks into stepping stones." And one thing that, as a result of my mom's decision, Tony, you remember the story. I was one of the two financial advisors to give my mom the green light.
Yeah.
The immense amount of guilt and regret and shame and embarrassment that I felt was immense. And it could have really ruined me. I could have went down the same path as my mom, a life of depression and anxiety, and it could have ended me. But I chose, with God's help, to turn that tragedy into triumph and these stumbling blocks into stepping stones. So the purpose of the book, it's nothing like any other financial book you read. It's not about cutting up your credit cards or eliminating debt or how to save in a college 529 plan. It comes at retirement from a non-financial perspective. It offers stepping stones that each reader can journey through, and it encourages the reader to set up those social structures, to identify their values, and to understand really what it is that they're going to retire to. So it's a passion project. It's a book that's been on my mind for quite some time. I wanted to release it on the 10-year anniversary and the celebration of Mom's life, and so it was released in 2021. And so it's been on sale, and your listeners, if they desire, would be able to find that on any platform, Amazon or others, that they'd be able to access books for them.
And it was very different from any other retirement or financial book. Most of those books I find very dry, and I actually can't finish them. But this book, definitely, you took a different angle, and I loved it. I even told my dad that after the interview, he's got to read the book because he's into finance stuff. But I'm like, this will just give him a different thing, because he's also getting to that age where retirement is something he could be considering, and I think he should be considering.
Yeah.
Because he's a workaholic. And so that's why I think this book could be very helpful for him, so he can try and find meaning and purpose afterwards.
Yeah. I just think there's a lot of people, and maybe your dad included, that just aren't aware that they should even be thinking of this, right? Every marketing commercial that's known to man is all about finances, making sure that you're financially prepared for retirement. This really sparks a new conversation that not too many financial advisors, no one in our industry is having. And this is nothing to do with finances. This is about structuring your life in such a way as to continue a life of meaning beyond retirement. So yeah, it brings a different message to the world. And I was humbled to be able to bring it in book form. I can only meet with one-on-one with my clients and tell the story, but I wanted to be able to bring it to the masses, and the book gave me the platform to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's a great message about asking that question: are you emotionally and mentally prepared? And how do you get emotionally and mentally prepared for retirement? And so I think it's a great book. I do recommend that people take and read this book. I'd show it. My screen would probably blur it. I've had that problem before when I've tried to show books. There we go. There we go.
There it is. There it is. Yep.
Yeah, great book. So I do recommend checking it out, and taking a look at what it has to say, because it was definitely a great book for considering. And when I am getting to a retirement age, I think it's something that I'll pick up again, and I'll read it again, just so that I can be more prepared for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I would say too that our firm, and we believe just so much in this message that we don't stand to have any financial gain from the sale of this book. All net proceeds from the sale of the book actually go to a scholarship that my wife and I set up at a local university. So it's the Pam Hixon Memorial Nursing Scholarship Fund, and it goes to a nursing student that attends the University of Findlay, which is where our local where our firm is headquartered, and it goes to a nursing student who has financial need and good grades. So I do not stand to participate in any financial gain from this. Rather, students who will enter the healthcare industry and bless the healthcare industry with their skill sets, the scholarship goes to them. And one of the exciting things about that scholarship fund is I get to meet with the recipient each year that the scholarship is rewarded. I get to sit down with them and share this story that I'm sharing to you and your listeners today. And so often, as these students transition into a career of healthcare, they're caring for others, caring for others, caring for others, and that is appropriate and that is right. And there needs to be self-care as well. Working on your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your social health, to ensure that you're not caring so much for others that you neglect yourself. So this story provides a platform for me to be able to communicate with the future healthcare workers that are graduating from this university.
Yeah, and I think that is amazing to do that. And nursing is a very, very important career that we have a nursing shortage in Canada. So our nurses work a lot of hours that they maybe shouldn't be working because we are so short. My stepmom was a nurse for a number of years, and then she worked in the seniors' homes until her back gave out on her, and she ended up retiring into a different line of work. And so still health related. She was into vitamins and that kind of stuff, so teaching people about that. But yeah, so I think it's very important for us to have those kind of things for our nurses, because not everybody can afford to go to get their education that they need to follow the career path that they want to follow, or that God has put before
in
them.
their heart. That's right. Yep.
Cool. So how did the company end up starting? And how have you seen God at work in that journey of your company really growing?
Yeah. So back in 1999, 2000, we have to remember the Y2K issue, right?
Yeah.
There was a potential for the world to come to an end as computers couldn't register the next two digits. Looking back, it's kind of comical, but at the time it was very frightening. And it was also frightening from a stock market perspective. That was when the tech bubble was bursting. In 2001, here in the United States, that's when the terrorist attacks had occurred and on the World Trade Center. So the September 11th terrorist attacks. So our country was kind of in a recession slash really bad downturn, borderline depression. And as I was working at the CPA firm, what I was doing is I was preparing tax returns. And there's a particular form that's called a Schedule D. And a Schedule D is where you report capital gains or losses. So if you were successful with an investment, you would have a gain. And if you were not successful with an investment, you would have a loss. And what I was seeing throughout that time frame was a lot of the clients that I was preparing tax returns for were recording losses. They were selling really great companies at a loss. And I just scratched my head thinking, why these companies aren't going out of business? This too shall pass. It's not fun at the time, but companies as robust as Pepsi or Microsoft or some of these larger companies, they weren't going out of business. They shouldn't have sold them at such a large loss. And it just boggled my mind that clients just were making these behavioral mistakes. Around that time frame, I had reconnected with a high school buddy of mine, and we started to do lunch together. He worked at a different CPA firm here in town. And as we did lunch from time to time, we realized that we had similar values. We were both men of faith. We were both family men. We really wanted to serve our wives and our kids well. And we were both entrepreneurial. And through a series of meetings and business plans, we decided that we really wanted to help investors make wise decisions with their money to prevent them from making those behavioral mistakes, which is selling at the low. That's the worst time to sell, right? That's the time to be greedy. That's the time you should be buying when stock prices are depressed. So in 2002, we did launch our business. And again, it was a scary time. We had to trust fully in God, knowing full well that, if we were faithful, he would be faithful to us. And over that journey, we've navigated the great financial crisis that occurred throughout 2008, 2009. We navigated the 2011 credit rating. The United States' credit rating was cut. 2018, there was midterms that didn't go the way the market expected. And so the market swooned as a result of that. And today we're stewarding over 300 million. We have about 14 team members and over 300 clients that we walk alongside their financial journey to ensure that from a behavioral side, they don't make those mistakes along the way.
And I think it's great to really help people in that in such an honest manner. And that's one thing that I think helps my wife in her sales. She's probably going to hate that I'm talking about her, but she doesn't just put people into funds because she's supposed to sell those funds.
Mm-hmm.
She is actually one of the people she was training. That's what they were doing. They were just putting people in the funds because they needed to sell those funds. And he's like, well, we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to sell these funds. And she's like, but is it going to benefit the client?
Mm-hmm.
Is it actually going to help them? You
Yeah,
need to have a
right.
reason why you're putting them in this fund, why you're putting them in, get them to buy this stock, like have a reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what has helped her
Yeah.
be so successful, is that she's honest. She can make those connections with customers. And there's even an older lady who lives right nearby us that now our kids go and visit all the time. And she originally was a client of my wife, and she found out my wife lived nearby, so she would bring us food and all this kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
my wife asked her why, and she's like, "Well, you connected with me, like you cared."
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
it's awesome now to see my kids connect with this lady, this older lady, and they like going to her house just because my wife made this connection. She actually cared about a person.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
think that's great about what you're doing is
Yeah.
that care.
Yeah, thank you, and kudos to your wife. She has embraced the same mentality that we have. We often we have goals within our firm to be able to manage so many assets, but we're quick to remind ourselves, our staff, that every dollar is assigned to a goal, and every goal is assigned to a person who's developed it. And so the relationship is much more important than any assets under management goal that we could establish. And so we're blessed to steward over 300 relationships and ensure that their journey toward financial freedom is intact. We're not recommending funds that will pay us the best kickback. We are providing a service to allow our clients to experience financial freedom.
Yeah, which is again just amazing. And you have said you wanted to help more people who are getting into retirement to be more prepared. What's the best way for them to accomplish that goal?
Yeah. Well, as a result of the launch of the book, we had such good feedback that the book was great, and it was somewhat actionable. But what about a more of a community to be able to navigate this transition together? And so, as a result of the success of the book, our firm actually launched a life coaching service called Refocus Coaching, and it's where we have a life coach on staff that puts on workshops and/or private coaching sessions with our clients or with non-clients. Really, we want to help anyone who has the desire to transition well. And it's during those workshops and during those private coaching times that our life coach is able to ask those tailored questions as we find what those unique skill sets that the retiree has built throughout their career, as we navigate what interests they might have, as we navigate whether or not their family is nearby. Would they be able to babysit grandkids, or would that be maybe too much for the parents? All of these discussions really start to take shape, and we create kind of this longing for what's next. It's very important that our clients do take what we call halftime. So the CFL up there in Canada, right? They have a halftime. So there's a first half. And let me ask you, Tony, do you remember the score of the first half of any of the last football games that you watched?
No,
No one
no.
really cares what the score is at halftime, but you do oftentimes remember, who won the game. But it's during that halftime of those football games that the coaches and the players will, make adjustments. They'll work on the game a little bit. They'll come up with a plan for what's next. And so it's during that transition, we do highly recommend that a client does take a halftime, 6 months, a year, to just breathe, to get those home projects caught up, to allow that career burnout to dissipate. But during that time, to be purposeful about planning for what's next, what's planning for that second half, so that they can continue to live a life of meaning and purpose in the second half of their life, and not just sit in front of a TV or doom scroll through their phone, or find all the bad news on CNN, the crisis news network.
Yeah.
All of those things can really cause unneeded anxiety. The world is full of abundance. God has blessed us with so much. The beauty of his creation needs to be seen and adored. And it's those kinds of things that we help our clients really focus on, so that they can really experience a great second half after their career is over.
Which is a very different message than what you see being spewed, because our world is so full of hate and division and anger, especially these days, where nobody wants to meet and discuss. And so having those messages of love and hope is something people need to hear.
That's right. That's right.
And how are you helping with the mental health side of things with that? I know part of that life coaching would be hitting on that, but how specifically do you think it's helping with people's mental health?
Yeah, my mom suffered from that mental health issue, and it wasn't necessarily a history of depression. It was situational. And to be able to step back and really focus on self for a while is okay. Mental health is obviously a buzzword in today's society, and it should be, because we've gone for far too long wanting people to really just, quote, suck it up and live life. But in reality, they need more care than that. And so through the content of the book, through the messaging of our life coach, we're able to help our clients and non-clients really navigate how to have that self-care and how to really think more positively about the future that awaits them.
Yeah, and mental health is something that personally for me is a big deal. I have PTSD myself, so it's something that is just it means a lot to me that to see companies and people take mental health seriously. And I know how hard it is for people with mental health to deal with it, to face it, because even insurance companies don't take it seriously. They aren't willing to pay for something they can't see, that a doctor can't physically diagnose. That means it doesn't exist in their books. So it's good to be able to discuss it and to see companies that do take it seriously.
Indeed. And Tony, I'd be quick to say that it's cool to sit across the Zoom room from a person that I believe to be an overcomer. So you've articulated that you've had PTSD, and it's cool to know that you're making an impact in this world, and you're living your calling. God has put you here on purpose for a purpose, and your message is being heard and felt. So congratulations to you, and keep up the great work. Really appreciate what an overcomer that you are, and a role model you are to your listeners and to me.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's taken a lot of counseling and years of God processing to really come to a place where I can actually talk about it freely. And it's one of the reasons why in this channel we do not back away from any topic, because it's if God has a message, we're going to get it out. And so I thank you for that. And I love what you're doing. And I want to just get you to leave us off with one piece of advice. And that would be, what piece of advice would you give to people who are at that point where they're looking at retirement?
Yeah. Well, thank you for allowing me this last piece here. Would it be okay if I share a story to kind of lead to the answer?
100%. Yeah.
This book project is a labor of love. Writing a book it takes a lot of time. It's a commitment beyond belief. And in 2019, I knew that in order to launch the book by 2021, which was the 10-year anniversary, I needed to start. And so in 2019, I pulled my chair up to my desk and my fingers to the keyboard, and I typed the first word of the book, which was gray. And that explained the morning that I found out that mom had committed suicide. It was just a gray morning in the month of March of 2011. And from that point forward, 35,000 words would flow. And it took about a year to get all of those through, because what happened in 2020? COVID. So not only was I writing a book, but I was also navigating market downturn with clients. I was also navigating COVID policies with the firm that I run. There was just a lot going on that year, but nonetheless, I got it done. And I turned in the manuscript to the publisher, and a book goes through three rounds of edits. The first round of edits is a developmental edit. The second is called a copy edit, and the third is a proofreading edit. The developmental edit is oftentimes the hardest to get through, and my particular manuscript went to a person. Her name was Pam. And for fun, I looked her up on LinkedIn and found out that she was a doctor of literary science from Harvard. I thought, that's interesting. That'll be kind of fun to see what she has to say about my manuscript. 5 weeks later, it's how long it took her to get through my manuscript, I got it back. And if you've ever used, Tony, have you used the track changes function in Microsoft Word?
Yes, I have. I've actually written a few books myself, so I definitely know this process.
So you know the process. When I got that book back, I had never seen so much red in my life. She just, the way I felt is that she destroyed my book. She destroyed my manuscript. I went through the 7 stages of anger and grief and regret and all the things all at once, and I just couldn't believe what she had done. And I was devastated. To be honest with you, I didn't want to continue. I wanted to give up, because it was just too much work to get to that point for her to have destroyed it like she did. So I invited my business partner down, Adam. He came down and I showed it to him. I'm like, look what she did. I couldn't believe it. And he showed me grace and said, Tony, you can't give up. I went home that night, talked to my wife, Carrie, and look what she did. Can you believe this? And Carrie was very graceful and said, Tony, I understand, but you can't give up. This message is too important. And then I shook my fist at God and I said, how could you do this? I spent so much time for her to be able to destroy my book like she did. I can't believe that you would allow this. And far be it from me to say that I've ever heard from God in an audible voice. But in my heart, I felt the words come back, Tony, I gave you a doctor of literary science from Harvard. You're welcome. And with that, I knew that I had been blessed with a person who knew exactly how to developmentally edit my book to make it even better than anything I could have written. And for the next 5 weeks of my life, I went through each and every one of her edits and accepted or rejected or changed or added. And soon enough, I was ready to put my manuscript back through the second phase of edits. Well, this time frame was about February of 2021. And that prior fall, a good friend of mine, a mentor, had just retired from his job. He was a CEO of a very prominent steel company, very type A personality, just a go-getter, business mentor of mine, good friend. But my mind is always on the lookout for people who retire in the fall, because my mom did that same thing. So I knew that he had traversed the winter months and the gray and the darkness and the cold. And I shot him a quick text and I said, can we go to coffee? And he agreed. And when we met at the coffee shop here locally on that cold winter's morning in February, he walked in a semblance of the man that I once knew. His countenance was down. He didn't smile. His voice was very monotone. And after exchanging a few pleasantries about how the family is doing and how he was doing, I looked him in the eye and I said, we'll call him Joe. I said, Joe, how's retirement? And in a moment of vulnerability, he decided to tell me the truth. And he said, Tony, it's not going well. You see, I met with my financial advisor for a year prior to pulling the trigger, and I checked all the financial boxes. but yet something's wrong. I feel adrift. I feel something just isn't there. I don't feel any purpose. I can't put my finger on it though. I took a deep breath and I knew exactly what I needed to do. You see, Tony, I had just submitted my round of edits. So to say that I knew my content was an understatement. I knew my content cold. And for the next hour, I was able to, the book wasn't even released. I was able to share its message with Joe. And by the time that coffee appointment was done, I saw him smile for the first time that morning. We departed after hugs and tears. And later that afternoon, Carrie was in town, my wife, and we went to lunch together. And I was telling her across the table, can you believe it? The book hasn't even released yet, and yet the message is helping people already. Isn't that awesome? She's like, absolutely, this is cool. And about that same time, I got a text from this gentleman. And far be it from me to be one of those married couples that check their phone the whole time. So I was like, Carrie, is it okay if I check this text? And she graciously agreed, and I opened it up. And the text read, Tony, thank you for your time this morning. Whether you know it or not, today, you quite literally saved a life. My mom was a nurse, and as such, she cared for her patients well. I'm a financial advisor, and as such, I care for my clients well. And this book provides a unique opportunity for me to join my purpose with my mom's as we communicate this story and these stepping stones to people who are transitioning into retirement. So, Tony, your question is, what advice would I give?
Yeah.
I guess my advice would be check out the book. I don't stand to gain financially from the sale of this thing. The scholarship fund stands to gain from it. And the message that it contains is important. And my mom is still saving lives 10 years later. So
Yeah.
thank you for the opportunity to share.
Well, and thank you for sharing. And it is awesome how God takes these situations and he uses them for good.
Mm-hmm.
Things that would be negative and uses them for good. And I just think it's important that people realize that you can take things that are negative and you can make them good. And your mom would be so proud of you right now, and of what you're doing. And it reminds me of a song, I believe it's Casting Crowns, where they said, I shook my fist at God and I said, God, why don't you do something? And
That's
God
right.
said, I made you. And I love that song because it hits me. You're gonna make me cry. It hits me right in the heart, that song, because so many times growing up, with all the different struggles that I went through, I spent a lot of time shaking my fist at God and getting angry with God, and the whole time God was saying, I made you.
Yeah.
You need to do something. I can use you. And like I said before, it's taken me a lot of years to get to the point where I'm allowing God to actually use me. There's still times where I shake my fist at God and I get frustrated, especially when I watch my son struggle with the health issues that he's struggling with. But God always reminds me, I made you. I put you in this situation so you can understand and you can help other people.
Wow.
And I see that with what you're doing.
Thank
And I think it's fantastic. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming on here, and thank you for writing the book.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you for those kind words. They're meaningful to me, and really appreciate the opportunity to share my story with you.
Thank you for listening to Cool Explorations. You've just been listening to Tony Hixon, and he's been talking about his book, Retirement Stepping Stones, Find Meaning, Live with Purpose, and Leave Legacy. He's been talking a little bit about his book, as well as retirement and how you can retire and have a meaningful life and maintain your walk with God through your retirement. Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.